Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to build capacity within the school setting um, and how to deliver treatments that work. So many of you probably have some sort of support team or some sort of student intervention planning team in your school already. So Chapter 5 of the NAC document talks more about how to get evidence-based practices into the classrooms and how to support teachers who service individuals with ASD. So it's a little bit different than our typical RTI planning team, but it could definitely be incorporated into your current team that you have now. So these are some things to think about as you think about your current setting. So the ASD evidence-based practice team will have many responsibilities, and some of those responsibilities that this team would have would include, they would have to evaluate the school's current capacity. They would have to look at the different groups of students and how they'll be affected, identify barriers to treatment, establish the training process, develop the necessary resources, and then just sort of put this plan into place. So I think it's important to keep in mind that these interventions can work for other individuals, not just students with ASD. So sometimes it's best to think of these evidence-based practices as really just best practice and best teaching. Okay, so these are the key steps for building capacity, and I'm not going to go into in depth in any of them right now because we're going to talk about them more in depth on the different slides. So first you would need to establish the planning team, clarify the problem and do a needs assessment, evaluate the outcomes, develop a training plan, and a plan for sustainability of the plan. So the first step is to establish your planning team. Each member will bring their own specialized training and experiences, and the staff should come from a variety of disciplines. So data collection is going to be huge in this process. You are already aware of the importance of data collection, but it will be a necessary component of this process in order to see if what you're doing is effective or not. If you don't collect data, you might just be wasting your time or creating ineffective interventions. So at least one member of your team should be proficient in data collection. In addition, different types of leadership skills are important, such as someone with strong skills in fostering collaborative relationships and maybe someone who is strong in decision making. So the team should strive to work together, and respect should be practiced by all members of the team. Someone should also be strong in how to promote generalization of the skills to different environments such as the hallway, playground, different classrooms, etc. The team is mainly responsible for planning, and evaluation should represent all professionals who will deliver the intervention. So this will include instructional agents, which are typically paraprofessionals. These people spend a great deal of time with individuals with ASD, so they should definitely be included in this process. Then support staff should be included. This can include a variety of individuals such as resource room teachers, speech and language pathologists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, school psychs, counselors, and even transportation could be included in this category. So these people often have a lot of knowledge and a wide range of knowledge and possibly additional training that would be useful in this process. In addition, personnel development staff should be included. These people have a knowledge in developing capacity within schools and are responsible often for different types of training. And administrators are essential in order to develop systematic change within your school. So the next step is to clarify the problem and conduct a needs assessment. So first you'd want to do a capacity evaluation in order to determine the extent to which the school currently has sufficient capacity to implement effective interventions. So you'd want to assess individuals in the school to get an idea of their perceived knowledge of evidence-based practices and treatment integrity. So the NAC article document on page 156, there's a research-supported treatment form which would help you gather some of this information. Then you would need to define the problem. So you describe the nature and scope of the problem is what you would do here. You need to think about a lot of different things, such as, are you going to teach all of the evidence-based practices? Are you going to target just certain ages and certain skills? Are you going to target this to all grade levels across the board, or are you going to implement intervention sequentially? So these are just some things you would need to think about when you look at defining the problem. And then there's systematic identification. So identify which systems will be affected by their efforts to produce systematic change. So you need to think about who will be most effective. Will it be the teachers? Will it be speech and language pathologists? Will it be administrators? So that is something that you need to think about. And then you need to do a needs assessment to help you identify barriers to implementing the treatment. So this can be done through a systematic evaluation of the school's perceived needs and barriers. You could use surveys or interviews to get this information. But this information is really important to get because you need to have buy-in from staff in order for this system-wide intervention to be effective. So some barriers that could come up is the additional time required to implement new treatments. We all already feel that we have too much to do and too little time to do it. So that could be one barrier. Treatment acceptability is often another barrier. So do they approve of the new treatment? If they don't approve of the new treatment, how likely is it going to be implemented accurately? So you need to look at how the staff feels about these different treatments before you go ahead and just start implementing them. You also need to look at history of treatment delivery. So some staff may be resistant to new treatments because of a lot of times there's fads in intervention research. So they might have done one thing and then all of a sudden the school switches it out and now they're supposed to do something new. So you have to sort of look at that history of treatment delivery, have novel treatment approaches been adopted in the past and then discarded. And then another potential barrier is the organizational climate. So this climate kind of refers to the atmosphere within the school system. You'd want to look at, is there an open and ongoing dialogue among professionals representing different service systems in the school? And so are these systems really ready to change? So the next thing you're going to want to do is evaluate outcomes. And first you'd want to look at outcomes for students. So the reason that you would go through all this effort of producing systematic change is to help students reach their full potential. So the planning team needs to be able to account for this and have strategies to evaluate student outcomes. So this was discussed more in Chapter 3, but it involves making target goals specific, observable, and measurable. And then often this will require employing single subject research design to determine if the intervention is effective with students. And then we also need to look at the outcomes for the school and for the educators. So one of the reasons that we implement this system-wide change is for educators to be able to provide these established treatments with a high degree of procedural accuracy. So procedural accuracy is also known as treatment integrity, treatment fidelity, or procedural fidelity. So the goal really with this is just to determine the extent to which you are correctly implementing an intervention. So the planning team should develop a strategy for evaluating procedural accuracy in order to improve performance. So procedural accuracy assessments involve breaking down an intervention into its component parts, and then a list of activities required for accurate implementation is then generated. And you guys should be familiar with this because you had to do this for your evidence-based practice assignment. You had to create a training protocol and then see if the teachers were implementing it accurately. Once you know how you're going to evaluate outcomes, you need to develop a training plan. So initial training may require multiple sessions. For instance, some trainers will progressively introduce new and more complicated strategies only after the professionals have practiced the skills learned in the earlier phases of training in the actual school setting. And so we know from reading the Effective Practices Chapter 8 that adults benefit from direct training, and this should be a component of every training plan. So this hands-on training is essential in order for teachers to pick up the skill. So training alone, unfortunately, is insufficient if the goal is to develop a high degree of mastery within the educational settings. So we need ongoing feedback or coaching in the real-world application of the new treatment. So the coach should assess the interventionist's use of the treatment in practice and then provide feedback and support to them when implementing the intervention. And the last thing you want to look at is sustainability. So this plan will not produce the needed outcomes for students with ASD if efforts are not made to sustain these system-wide changes. So the planning team must either make a long-term commitment to work to sustain these changes or develop a second sustainability committee dedicated to these purposes. And the things that need to be looked at for sustainability are identify ongoing needs, identify the resource needed to keep these treatments in place, identify new barriers, ensure positive outcomes, and then make modifications to the procedures as needed.